Hey everybody, welcome back to Pizza Legends. Today we're going to work on saving and loading our game progress. So far, we've set ourselves up to add a ton of content to the game. You could keep adding events and cutscenes and overworld maps and really make this game large. And let's be real, the games we're channeling here take like 20 plus hours to complete. It's unlikely that someone would actually sit down and play this game start to finish without needing to stop and take a break. We need a way to save our progress as we go so you can close the browser, come back later, and pick up right where you left off. As always, the code and all that is linked below. Let's get started. We are going to kick this video off by doing a lot of work in our Overworld Map file. So I'll pop open Overworld Map. And at the bottom here, we have the configuration for all the maps in our game. We're going to start keeping track of which map you're on now, so that when you choose to save the game, we can tuck that away somewhere and then be able to recall it later. And one thing we're missing right now is sort of a unique identifier for each map. And so I'm going to go through and add an ID to each one. So that's our demo room. Next, we have our kitchen. And we're going to add a new map in this video. It's going to be called Street. So we'll say the ID is Street. We're going to paste in some configuration. We have the upper and lower source. All this is found in the code download asset links. And we're going to start with just our hero game object here. Let's go ahead and boot up the game on this map. So if I'll go to Overworld.js here. Instead of starting in demo room, let's start on Street. So I've booted up the game here, and here we are on our new street map. I've intentionally spawned us near this door here because we're going to be using it a lot. So for the saving and loading business, we're going to try a relatively simple approach, where rather than keeping track of every single thing that's happening in the map right now, we're just going to track a few details about the hero. Specifically, what map are they on right now, where did they enter the map, and what direction are they facing? So if you're quitting the game and coming back later, it's generally safe to assume that we can put you right back at the entrance point of however you got in the map that you're on now. We wouldn't want to put you exactly where you were in the case that maybe you'd run into an NPC or something like that, because we're not going to be saving the NPC locations. So the entrance point thing tends to work pretty well, but again, feel free to modify any of this to fit the needs of your game. So we're going to wire up this door to change the map like we've seen before, but we're going to also add the ability to set us in a specific spot when we load that map. Back in our street config here, let's go ahead and add our cutscene spaces. Remember, this is an object of coordinates. So here's our door coordinate. I had just happened to know it. And on the space, we'll have an array of events. The type will be change map, just like we've seen before. We're going to go into the kitchen map. And now we're also going to specify the X and Y and direction that we want the hero to face when we enter that map. And before we add them here, let's demonstrate what we're going for. So when I boot up the game and walk into that door space, it puts me kind of in the middle of the room at that initial hero spot. It doesn't make a ton of sense. We really want the hero to start in this doorway facing up because I walked up to get into this room. So here on this event, we're going to add some more data. We're going to include the X value and the Y value of where we want to land. And we're using our helper. I just happen to know it's at space 510. And again, we want the hero to be facing up when we make it into that next room. So let's handle this event by going to our event handler in the overworld. We'll find the change map event. Here's where we specify which map we want to change to. But now let's add a second argument here that gives us more information about how to load up that map. Here, what we can do is pass through those same X, Y, and direction values that we put on that event. So it'll look like this .event.x, y, and direction. Now we need to go to Startmap method on the Overworld class. So let's find that. Here it is. We're going to add a second parameter here called hero initial state. And we're going to set this up to actually be optional so that at the event that we want to just load the map with all the default values, we just don't have to pass this. It'll just use that. But if we do provide it, we can go ahead and start overriding some of the values in our map objects. So we can look at the map game objects, find the hero, and start overriding these values. And we'll repeat the same idea for Y and direction. So now when I load up the game and go in the door, my values are reset to be right on the spot of that entryway. Let's go ahead and wire up this doorway too, so that when I step in this space, it'll put me back in the street map, right in that doorway facing down. Back in Overworld Map here, let's go find our kitchen map. And we don't yet have cutscene spaces, so we'll add that. It's an object. And I brought in some predefined configuration here. Same idea. This space is where that downwards doorway is in the kitchen. When we step on it, we want to change map to the street at the location of the doorway on the street with the hero facing down. So let's see what this looks like. I'm back in the kitchen here. Here I go through the doorway. And now I'm back outside. So now these maps are kind of connected properly. So now we're ready to tackle the save feature. The idea for what we're going for here is that if I pause and save the game, I want the game to remember that I was in this map and I, entered the map from right here. If I'm in this map though, and I pause and save the game, when I load the game after shutting the browser down and restarting it, I should be back in this map. And we also want to make sure our player state persists. We're going to add a new class to our project that's going to help us sort of remember those details. So in the root here, I'm going to add a new file. It's going to be called progress.js. New class, progress. It's going to have a constructor and then some methods on it, like save the progress, load the progress. Maybe we need to know if we even have any save data to load in the first place, so maybe a method for that. Now the constructor is just going to start with some default state that I'll bring in here. This class will keep track of which map we've entered, where do we enter it, so starting hero X and Y, and then which direction the hero is facing when the hero entered the map. Now whenever we call the save method here, we want to write some data to browser local storage. If you've never used local storage before, here's my butchering of an explanation of it. You can think of it like your own little private bucket of data that's stored only on your computer or device, scoped to this domain. So we're going to be able to write some values here that we'll be able to pull up later that will survive page reloads. But this information is only stored on our devices. And the way you use it to write those values is with the setItem method. First, it wants a key. We're going to use the key a few times, so we're going to go ahead and save it to the class up here. Say save file key. We'll call it Pizza Legends save file 1. And as a general random note, I think it's a good idea to usually namespace your local storage keys. If you have different projects going on and they both run on the same domain, like a lot of build systems like localhost 3000, for example, anything you put in local storage will be per that domain, not necessarily the project you're working on. So if you get a lot of things in there, it's nice to just have a clear indicator of like what it's for. Also helps with naming conflicts and that kind of thing. Okay, so at that key, we're going to write a new JSON object, but the thing is we have to stringify it. So we'll use json.stringify here, passing in an object. So the browser will take care of turning our data into some gnarly string. When we retrieve it later, we'll go ahead and parse it, but this is just the thing you need to do for storing. And now we're just going to make a list of everything that we want to save. So of course the map ID that we're on now, where did the hero start? Same thing for Y and direction. And we want to remember bits of our player state. So in player state, we have pizzas. And remember, this is a global object, so we can look it up from anywhere right now. We'll remember our lineup, our items, and of course, our story flags. Now, when it comes time to getting the save file, we can sort of do the reverse feature of setItem. Or I guess it's not reverse, it's more like just looking it up. I guess reverse would be like deleting it, but whatever, you get it. So we'll say get item, and that will retrieve an item with this key. And so we'll use our same key again. We can save this as file. And now if we find a file at that location, it's going to be one of these gnarly strings because we stringified it going in. But we want to return it as normal data. So if we found the file, we'll go ahead and return a parsed version of that string. But otherwise, we can just return null. Now for this series tutorial purposes, we're just going to have the one save file. But if you wanted to make a thing where you could have multiple save files in the game, you could totally do that. You would just need to change out which key your data is being saved to, and then maybe retrieve a list of those keys. Then you could present one of those like, which game do you want to load menus, which are always kind of cool, I think. Now for loading, we can almost do the opposite of what we did for saving. So first we'll retrieve the save file. If we found one, We'll do sort of the reverse process, where we'll set this .map ID, meaning this on the progress class here, to be whatever was in that file. We'll repeat that same idea for X, Y, and direction. So again, it's sort of mirroring this up here. And next we'll iterate through player state and reset any of the values we found in our file player state. So here we're going to say object.keys, the file player state. We can set the window level player state key, the equivalent one of whatever we found in there. So now this class is set up to save files to the browser and then bring them back into our game here. Let's go ahead and just do a few more things we need to get this on screen and working. The first would be going to our index HTML file and actually including the script on the page. Next, we need an instance of the progress class to use, and our overworld is going to store that. So we'll go into the init method, say this.progress is a new progress. Got to spell it right. Now to actually fire off that save method that's going to be on this class here, let's go to our pause menu. And at the top, all we're passing into this thing is a reference to the onComplete, but let's also give ourselves a reference to that overworld progress class. So I'll say this.progress is progress that we pass in. We need to find the overworld event that we use to actually kind of create that menu. And so we'll go to pause here. Right before we pass in complete, we can also pass in progress is going to be this.map.overworld.progress. So it's the same instance. We're just going to have access to it in the pause menu now. And so our pause menu, in this area where we have the get options, there's this stubbed out save option. We can call this.progress.save. So that'll work and do its thing. And then after that, we can just close the menu here. And now we're almost ready. But if we go to the overworld really quick, after we start the map here, we want to then start writing some of those values to progress so it can kind of do its thing and keeping track of which map we're on. So we'll say this.progress.map ID will be the map config ID, same one that we're using up here. And then we'll also update these values anytime we start a new map. So that's the X, Y, and direction. We're going to pull those values from the map. And so those may have been the default values, or they may have been whatever we passed in here with hero initial state. We'll keep track of whichever one was used. Okay, I'm in the game again. Here I come into the building. In here, I'll pause the game and hit the save option. Now, if I open the DevTools, and in Chrome, if you open the application tab here, and then on the left, there's this local storage spindly thing. You can spindle that open, select the domain that you're running the game on, and then you'll see the local storage that we wrote here. See, it's this gnarly string full of our data that looks pretty familiar, like starting hero X. The numbers are flowing through, which kitchen or which map we're on. And then our pizza lineups, everything is in here. It even gives us a nice little way to spindle through the data here. So now that we're saving data to the browser fine, and notice that I can reload the game, and this data is still here. So it still remembers all the stuff I did when I paused and hit save. Now we just need to get that data back into the game. So back in Overworld.js, currently the game is always booting up with this sort of static data. Let's go ahead and start asking if we have any save data to use instead. So let's add some clarity real quick, because this might get a little nuts. So first we're creating a new tracker. Here we're loading up the HUD. And now we're going to check for saved data. So first I'm going to create a new initial hero state. I'm going to default it to null, assuming that we don't have anything. But then we can look up a save file using this.progress.get save file. And if we found one, we can run the loader. So that's this.progress.load. And again, what this is going to do, let's just look at it one more time, is update a bunch of values internally in the progress here, and then also on the window level player state. So we're putting those values back in. So in theory, if we had a saved player state, the HUD will pick that up because we're loading this before we start the HUD. Now, if we have a file, we want to go ahead and use that hero information from it. So we'll reset that to an object with X, being the X that's in there, and the Y in the direction. And now down here, when we actually start the first map, we don't want to hard code street. We want to use whatever progress has, which progress will come with a default map. Remember up here, we set it to demo room. This could be like the first map in your game, or however you want to boot up the game if you're just trying to test something. Let's just leave it like demo room for now. If I go in Overworld again, instead of just using street, we want to make sure that we pull that key from this .progress.map ID. And then for the second argument here, we want to make sure that we pass through our initial hero state, which null is totally valid. Remember, if it's null, that means it'll just use all the map defaults, and that's totally fine. Add some more comments here. So now we're going to load up the game, and hopefully we'll see all of the state from that saved map we were in and at the point that I entered the map. So I'll reload the game, and it's broken. Because I have a typo, of course. Okay, let's go fix that progress. I just want to give a quick shout out to anybody that's been watching this whole series and has been dealing with my awful typos. Thank you. I really appreciate you sticking with me here. And so that's right here, get item. Let's try that again. Now when I load the game, you can see that I'm in the map that I have saved data in. And I started at the correct spot. I'll go south here. And I'll save the game again. So pause, save. And now when I reload the browser, I start in that entrance to the map. So back in Overworld here, there's one thing I just want to talk through real quick. So this is really just for testing purposes to get this feature working. Right now, the Overworld is always using that save file data if we have it, and that could be super annoying because maybe we want to start a new game. In the next video, we're going to move on to creating a title screen where you can actually choose new game or continue game if we have one. And so that's going to edit some of our logic here. But just for this video's sake, if you want to boot up the game without a save file, you can just comment this part out. And now I'll load it. So we're defaulting to the demo room. There's some cool stuff I want to show you here now. If I add some story flags here, like talking to Ario here, she'll say, isn't Ario the coolest? Like I talked to him. I'll go craft this pizza feature we did in a previous video, Portobello Express. So now my HUD has changed. I'll pause the game and save it here. Back in the code, I'm going to bring our save file loading back in. I'll reload the game. And so now you see the game has launched and it remembers my story flags. So this pizza is taken up. It says I've already used this. Area won't change, but she'll still say the same thing. Area's the coolest. So now it's like I'm right back where I left off. A few notes before we close out here. Be sure in Overworld Map, anytime you use this change map event now, that you provide these extra details because the game requires them now. Without them, you'll get an error. So like here in this default one, I'll go ahead and add that extra information. Now there's just one more thing we need to clear up before we're done with this one. If we go back into our overworld where we're actually changing things around on the hero after the map has loaded, we could cause some problems because the map under the hood is keeping track of walls and that kind of thing. And so we need to make sure that the hero's wall is actually synced up with the hero again. And so we're gonna just make a little change here. I'm gonna pull out hero from our game objects, which will help clean this up a little bit too. And now before we modify anything, I'm going to ask the map to remove the wall that it was at the hero's position. So hero.x, hero.y. Remember, we have nice methods for this kind of thing on the map itself. And then when we've moved the hero to their new position, then we're going to add a wall there too. Otherwise, we'd be left with this ghosty space that still is solid, yet no one's there. That's because the hero spawned there, but then was moved without the wall moving too. Now when I navigate around, all the people walls are still intact. and everything seems to be working. As always, thank you so much for watching this video and the whole series. Quick reminders, come join us in Discord. Tell us about your game project. We'd love to hear about it. If you're interested, there's a way to support this channel directly. There's a link below for that. I'll catch you in the next video where we build a title screen for this game.